Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Srini here, and this is my channel. You can just go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to get notifications. So as I've mentioned before, you'll be getting free videos on Java, Python, Selenium, API automation, robotics process automation. So you'll be getting interview questions as well. So it will be very useful for you. So just go ahead and subscribe. So let's get on to today's topic. Today's topic is on Selenium interview questions for a 2 to 3 years experienced professional, and we're going to look at the part 3 of the video in this particular series. So we have already seen part 1 and part 2, where in part 1 we had seen like what are the general questions you can expect when you go for the interview. That is the round 1, and the round 2 we have discussed in our previous session, that is part 2, where what are the different questions they can ask you on core Java. And so if you haven't looked at my previous videos, I would strongly recommend you to go over those first and then come back to this particular part. And if you are new to Selenium, or if you are not much aware of Java, then you can go over my tutorials on Selenium and Java. I'll give a link for the same in my video. So let's get started. In this particular session, we're going to look at the part 3, that is on Selenium, especially what are the different interview questions which the interviewer can ask you. So let's get on to the topic. So I have crafted down different questions which are based on my experience of taking interviews, as well as have attended a lot of interviews. So what are the common questions which I have seen interviewer generally focuses on asking? Those I've listed down here. And I'll just try to explain you as and when I go across all these questions. So you can expect more questions if your experience is more, and slightly the complexity of the interview will rise as well as your experience is increasing. So these are specifically for those people who are between 2 to 3, not more than 3, because for more than 3, they will be also focusing a lot of questions on framework. So let's get started. So the first question here is that what is a WebDriver? Explain in short with some benefits compared to the other Selenium versions. So here the interviewer is just trying to find out what is the knowledge level of the candidate, and are they just simply try to mug up something, or they know practically what is a WebDriver, how it is efficient over the previous versions of the Selenium. So you need to know a little bit history about Selenium if you were to answer this question in a proper fashion. So you have to just give them an idea what is a WebDriver. So WebDriver is an interface, and it is such a strong interface that it allows us to do automation of UI browser testing, right? Web UI browser testing. And you have to give some benefits. So what are the benefits which we have of WebDriver, right? It allows parallel execution. It allows us to execute on different browsers like Chrome, IE, Firefox, Safari. It allows us to do coding in different programming languages like Java, Python, Ruby, Perl, right? So it's very good in terms of such kind of benefits. If you compare with its previous versions like Selenium Remote Control. Now Selenium Remote Control had a drawback that always a server has to be started each time if you want to do any interaction. And that remote server would actually mimic as if it is the actual requester to the web browser. But WebDriver is removing that particular portion. It's saying no need to start any server at all. It will give an indication to the browser. So it's going to use the operating system's native abilities to interact with the browser. And that way it doesn't need any server to be started as such. That is why it is fast, as well as it is able to save a lot of time as compared to Selenium Remote Control. Now coming to Selenium IDE, Selenium IDE was just used for like a record and play plugin tool, record and play tool, and that too it was only for Firefox. So if it's all, let's say we want to do some structural programming with respect to some conditions, do some exception handling. So those kind of scenarios we can't use in Selenium IDE. That is, the WebDriver is so good because we can use programming languages like Java, Python, and we can use those advantages of different programming principles. So that's the first question. Second question is, if you get element not found exception while performing execution, what could be the possible reasons for the same? Now, there are some different scenarios where a particular automation professional could get stuck. Such a kind of exception might get encountered. The possible reasons for those could be that the element is tried to be found in the automation script before even the page gets loaded completely. So often you would see that sometimes the application doesn't behave the same way. It might be a little slower on a specific day. So element has not get loaded in the page and we are trying to do some interactions on the web element, like click on it, select some value from a drop down. It could be any type of web element, right? So in those scenarios, we can get element not found exception. Or what could be the other scenario they might ask you? So the other scenario could be that might be this element could be a part of some frame, right? You might be knowing frame concept. If not, you can go over my video on frames in Selenium tutorials playlist. So we have to first check if in the HTML DOM structure, right? If we are inspecting a element to find out its ID or whatever the different attributes or XPath, is it a part of any frame or not? The reason is because we have to then switch to a frame, and only when we switch to the frame we would be able to interact with the element directly. Otherwise it will not allow us to interact with the element, and in that scenario as well we can get element not found exception. Or what could be the other reason? The other reason could be that the element is not on the visibility factor, so it's not visible in the current page. In a perspective, what I'm trying to say, so I'm just giving you some example. Let's say I've got Selenium easy, right? Let's take a simple example. This is a website. Now if I want to interact with a element which is not in this particular frame, I mean to say it's not particular in this visibility range, if it is somewhere here at the bottom, then directly sometimes the WebDriver interface may not be able to directly know it, or click on it or act on it. So in that scenario sometimes we will have to use actions class, and we will have to drag it down and then interact with the element. So sometimes due to the visibility of the page as well, the element may not be visible completely. So that could be the three different scenarios which you can get element not found exception. What is meant by locator, and what are different locator strategies one can use in Selenium? This is a very basic question. Even a fresher could be asked such a kind of question, because this has to be known by anyone who is working on Selenium or who has just learned Selenium. So a locator is a way of identifying an element uniquely within the current web application. So how do we identify it? We identify it using the inspecting capabilities of the browser. We might be using Chrome, we might be using Firefox or Internet Explorer. There is always a way of pressing F12 or inspecting the element directly. So if you want to inspect an element, we have to find its locator. Locator are nothing but the attributes of the element which will make it uniquely get identified in the current web page. So if you look at this particular example, I can find out the locator for input forms. So this particular element is having a type as drop down. So if I take the class attribute, this is a tag, right? If I take the class attribute, there are 7 matches found. You can see here there are 7 matches found. So it's not able to give us any unique value because there are 7 matches found. So then we have to use XPath. So that is the meaning of locator. How do we identify an element in the current web application page? What are different locator strategies one can use in Selenium? You can go over my videos. I have created a video which is detailing in depth about different locator strategies we are going to use. So those are ID, class, name, then we have CSS selector, then we have XPath, we have link text, we have partial link text, right? So you can go over my videos and you can also use it. You can just form the XPath. So XPath is of 2 types. We have absolute and we have relative. So just to give you an example, if I want to form if I would have to form a XPath directly, okay, for this particular element, I would have to come from the top of the HTML structure. If you're talking about creating the XPath to like this way, I would be starting from the root node. That is called as the absolute XPath. If I were to reach to this particular date pickers element or the input forms element right from the HTML portion, so it will be just having like this. It will be like one by one we are traversing down the structure from HTML. Then we might be having body, right? And after body, you can see that if you collapse it, this is the first div tag, right? So we will be saying div of 1 like that. Now if we go inside this div, like that is how we are going to form the XPath. This is called as the absolute XPath. Now if we were to directly find this particular element, the quicker way would be you can use some advanced way of identifying the locators. So you can go for relative XPath. So I'm going to say text equal to input forms. Now you can see it's able to locate this particular element. Okay, now I can use even contains. These are the different ways we can use XPath. This is called as the relative XPath. So now you can see there are two elements found out. When it was exactly equal, it was finding only input forms because of the it's like a text format, and if you are using contains text, it's highlighting two elements. So this is the relative XPath. So you can look at my video to get a detailed understanding of the same. What is a JavaScript executor, and when and how do we use it, and explain with an example or a scenario where we use it. So a JavaScript executor is a kind of an interface which we have, which will allow the web driver, through a web driver, it will be able to execute its JavaScript behavior or validations, right? Okay, so how do we use it? So if you are asked for an example, you can just use such a kind of syntax. Let me show on a practical thing. So let's say this is a driver I'm having, right? So you can create a JavaScript executor. So this is how we are going to create a JavaScript executor. You will have to assign it to the driver, but it cannot be directly assigned. So you'll have to typecast. If you see here, we are going to use, okay, change to JavaScript executor. The S is small, and it's going to give you error. It will ask you to cast it to JavaScript executor. So you have to cast it like this way. And now you can just execute the script. So there are methods for within JavaScript executor. So which particular scenario they might ask you, you are going to use JavaScript executor. We might be able to use JavaScript executor in those scenarios when for a particular web application, our script is not able to use ID, class, or with whatever available attributes as well. It is not able to perform actions. Maybe due to some restriction or maybe due to some limitations of the application, we are not able to do operations on an element. The usual methods are failing. In those scenarios, we will find JavaScript executor very useful. So what is the syntax to do that? It's very simple. So you just have to provide some arguments here. So you're going to say arguments of 0. Let's say if you are trying to do some click operation, dot click, that is the operation you're going to do. And what is the type of attribute you're going to use? We're going to use as a button. So we are going to say it's a button. So this is how we are going to use, as an example, you can tell them that this is how we are going to initialize a JavaScript executor variable and then use its existing method execute script and do some action on a particular element like clicking on a button. So this is how we write the syntax to click on a button, right? So let's continue. How can we handle multiple windows which are open and perform some operation on it? Now I have already discussed about this in my previous session, but just to again explain it in brief. So we can handle multiple windows which are open. So like a very classic example, I can take example of naukri.com. So here I have shown in my previous videos as well. You can see there are multiple windows which are open. This is the main window, which is having this title, and there are 3 pop-up windows which are also available here, like Skies, Sykes, Saira, Cedar, and Amazon, right? So these 3 different companies are having their own advertisement pop-ups, right? So in Selenium, we have a way of switching to the window. So what we would say is that we have to first switch to window. And how do we know to which window to switch to? So we have the concept of window handle. If I say driver dot get window handle, if I just store this into, see, this is going to be a string. So if I store it into some string variable, let's say parent window, right? So I can switch to this parent window whenever I want to, right? And if you were to switch to any of its child windows, then you have to make it as a, I can copy this line and I can just create another statement here. And this is going to be a list, not list, sorry, a set, because it's going to be unique. The window handles of each and every pop-up window, if you see here, these are all going to be child windows and they are going to have their individual way of identifying what is the window. So we are going to store it in a string format. So it's going to be set of string and we're going to say child windows, right? And it's going to be get window handles. So this is going to return you a set of string, if you see here, and you're going to import the collections java.util. Now what you have to do, if you were to switch to any child window, you just have to use switch to dot. Now you have to use again the same method window, but the argument what you're going to give to this method will be extracted from this particular child window. So you have to use a iterator. So you have to say while. So what I'll be doing is that I'll just create a iterator variable like this. And if you do a mouse over on iterator, it is going to return you an iterator of string, right? So you're going to have a iterator of string and just call it as itr some variable, and you're going to use this particular Java util iterator and just iterate over it. So I'm going to say itr dot has next. So till when it has some value, you're going to switch to the child window, right? So let me put this particular one. Yeah, I don't require it for now. So what I'll be doing is that I'll be creating a variable called child window equal to, and I'm going to say, so this I'll do later on, I'm going to say itr dot next. So this is going to give me one identifier of the window, and I just simply have to switch to the window. So this is how I switch to the window. So this is how we are going to use the ability to in Selenium to handle multiple windows which are open and perform some action on it, and then we can do whatever you want to, like click on it, close it, etc., etc. Yeah. So how do you handle Windows based pop-up and web based pop-up in Selenium? Now, we have already seen in this 5th interview question Windows based pop-up because web based pop-up, because it's a part of the web application. It's a part of the web UI application, right? So for Windows based pop-up, now what does this mean? So this particular thing means that we are trying to do some action which is interacting with the windows, like we might be trying to do uploading a file, okay, or we might be trying to do some interaction with our Windows operating system or Mac or whatever operating system, right? If we are trying to do any kind of a pop-up is trying to do an interaction with the Windows or any operating system rather than the web application, those are called as Windows based pop-up, and Selenium cannot handle them. That is the limitation we have in Selenium. So what is the workaround, or what is the way to go about? We have to use a concept of auto IT. So auto IT is like a separate tool which we have to download. So I'll create a separate session on auto IT and explain you all how to use it. So this will allow us to handle Windows based pop-up as well. It will have its own editor. I cannot go in depth in this particular session, but I'm just giving an overview here. It's going to have its own editor of finding the locator of that particular pop-up or that Windows based whatever application we have. Using that script, what you're going to prepare, and there will be a compiler in auto IT, right? So once we create the script, it's going to compile it. So that compilation script is going to convert, and once it compiles, it's going to convert into a .exe file. I'm just explaining the process to you. And in particular in Java, there is a method. That particular method we can use to execute the exe file, and that is how we will achieve the action, maybe uploading of a file or doing any action which is interacting with the Windows. So even if you don't get this particular concept right now, it's fine. I'll explain it again to you in detail when I take a session on auto IT. So for now, just understand that Selenium cannot handle Windows based pop-up. It will be taken care by a auto IT, a separate tool, and you would have to know the basics of it at least, so that we can talk to the interviewer and tell them how it has to be done, right? Let's look at the next question. What is a framework in Selenium? Why it is needed? A framework is a collection of different packages, classes, interfaces, or whatever different components we have we require it to make it as an automation suite. That is a framework, right? Now, how do you design it and why it is required, that we will have to explain. It is needed so that we organize our code into a systematic fashion and promote code reusability rather than having any code redundancy. We will want to promote code reusability and optimize it as much as possible in the best fashion. So that is why we require a systematic framework. And also, depending upon the situation, what does our application automation demands, we are going to choose which type of framework is required for our web application testing, right? So there are different types of application framework I'm going to mention here. So the first one is keyword driven framework. So in this lecture, I'm just going to give you an overview about these framework. We have data-driven framework, right? Right. What next we have? We have hybrid framework, and we have Cucumber BDD framework. We have modular framework, right? So these are the different frameworks which you need to remember and tell them. Now you might be surprised or you might be confused. Why haven't you seen this term page object model, which you have heard so much now? Maybe test ng, some may feel that is also a framework. No, these are not frameworks. So you have to be pretty clear. If the interviewer tries to confuse you by asking, have you missed out some frameworks? Isn't page object model as a part of framework as well, or test ng? No, these are not frameworks. Page object model is a design pattern. It is not a framework. It is a design pattern to have the entire application separated out into different pages. Each page is going to have the locators as well as the basic interaction which we will be doing with the locators, right? It is basically making our automation suite organized, and we will be separating out the locator from the test data. So no need to worry much about in detail for now. Test ng is just like a, what do you say? It's just like a practice use, like how we have JUnit and test ng, right? So there are different types of annotations we are having. So there are two popular ones, JUnit and test ng. So JUnit is used by the developers for unit testing, and automation testers, they prefer test ng because it is having powerful annotations and powerful features. So we are going to look at test ng, of course, in a separate lecture. No need to worry. These are not frameworks, but these are just the ability to make our code more optimized and reuse the code. So that is how we are going to use annotations in this particular test ng, and we have test ng.xml one concept. So we are going to see how we are going to use it, right? So no need to worry for now, right? So these are not frameworks. These are just different concepts which are a part of Selenium. So frameworks are these what I have listed down here, right? So let's get on to the next question. So the next question is going to be on explain the framework structure of the type of framework you have worked upon. Now it depends like what particular framework you've used in your previous company or the current company before you go when you go for the interview, right? So they would be asking you a question specific to that framework, because you will be telling you might be having experience on data-driven framework or a hybrid framework or a keyword-driven framework. So, and the same you might be mentioning in a resume as well. So they will be asking you to just explain the structure of the framework and what all the different components are there, and just explain the design of it. So you're going to create a framework. I have already shown it in my previous particular lecture. You can just draw a structural diagram like that and explain the different components. Like you can tell them, I'm going to have a package like config package. It is going to have a config properties file. Here I'll be storing the locators for the entire application. I'll be having a package which is having the logs captured for the manual logs or the Selenium logs. Manual logs are the ones which we want to explicitly capture when we are doing execution, right? We will be using the log statement or the debug statement or the error statement. Selenium logs are the ones which will be automatically captured by the system when it starts from right from the before class or before test. Whatever actions happen, like loading the browser, doing whatever internal things are there, till the end, everything will be captured in the Selenium log. There will be different pages. In case you are using a page object model design pattern, you are going to have a separate package called pages here, right? And in this particular pages, you're going to have individual Java classes now. Now, if you're going to use page object model design pattern, in this config properties, you will not be having locator. Instead, locators will be a part of this individual package Java files. So what will config properties have? Config properties can have these kind of variables like application URL, right? Then you can have a path for Chrome driver. What is the path for your Chrome driver variable? So you can store the path, like see whatever path is there, you can mention that path, you can mention the application name, right? So these all different things you can have in your properties file. And of course, you'll be having a code to read the properties file and use these specific properties, right? you will have a separate package now for the report. So we are going to store the extent report onto this path once the test execution is completed. We will be having our resources as a part of our framework itself, so that we don't have to search across the particular workspace wherever these exe files are present for the different drivers, Chrome driver, IE, or Firefox. We will be having separate package where the screenshot gets saved. So we might be capturing the screenshots whenever a test gets failed. So those have to be captured onto this path. We are going to have a separate package for test data files where we are going to store the external test data file. And from here is where the test cases are going to interact and get the data. We'll have a separate package for test scripts. So we are going to have a test cases here. So it could be with @test, that is test-ng could be used, or we can simply use this public static void main and call the specific method. So it depends like how you want to go about your design. If you want to use test-ng, you can go ahead with that. If you want to use main method, you can go ahead with that. I personally feel test-ng is very good and efficient. So I will be going for test-ng. So I'm just going to comment out this part. So what I'll be having, I'll be creating a method here, and I'll be having, I'm just going to say some test here. Okay. So this is how test-ng is. You're going to have your @test annotation. You're going to add the library, and you're going to import this test annotations. So this is how we go about in case of a framework, right? And we'll be having utilities, one separate package wherever we want to have common methods, etc., created for specific or common actions as such, right? Like clicking on something, selecting from a drop down, sending some keys. So those all actions we're going to have separate methods created, and we are going to make them static so that we need not create any object. So we can make them static like that, and just we're going to say utilities.click. So wherever we are going to call it, we are just going to make direct access through this utilities class. So this is how we are going to design a framework in general. So that is this particular question, 8th question. What is an object repository in Selenium? How can it be achieved? Object repository in Selenium, we don't have any automatic object repository unlike QTP. So we have to create our own object repository. So how do we achieve that? We can achieve it through multiple ways, but the most common way is through usage of config properties file. So here we can store all the different locators, and each particular locator is going to have a value. So application URL, these are all attributes. Now let's say we have some home page link. This is the name of the element, and I'm going to store its XPath here. Like it could be something like this. Maybe, yeah. So I'm just going to say, as a vague example, I'm just taking. So we're going to store the locators here. Or let's say there is something to be identified with ID, maybe image, logo, something like that, right? And it is through a ID, and we can give the ID here. So we can just say image logo by ID. So we can just give this as a name of the element, and here we can store the ID. So img. So this is how we can store the locators in the properties file, and this is the way of creating an object repository in Selenium. Don't have it. What I'm trying to say, don't use it as a hard coded in your scripts, like in your test cases. Don't directly say like this: driver dot find element by dot ID. Don't do this. This is going to hard code the value. If you hard code the value here, it is very difficult. If in case any ID or any property changes, it's very difficult to go back and find out across all the pages, right? So better is always to store it in a separate file. We call it as the object repository. You can just rename it to as or.properties, or you can keep it as config.properties. You can keep the same name. So instead of directly hard coding on this particular test scripts file, we will be having a way of getting the values from the config properties file. So I'll show you how it has to be done. So we're going to create a WebDriver variable. So yeah, I think we have not added the package. We have not added the different jars here to this particular one. So just imagine if the jars would have been there. So we just have to use it. So now what we are going to do is we are going to have a properties file created, object of properties file created, This is a part of Java util. So we'll have to basically have a way of getting the data from a properties file, right? So it is actually like a file. So first of all, we have to find out what is the path of the config properties file. So we'll do right click here. We'll just use the path here. So it's currently situated at this particular path. Okay. And what we are going to do here is that we are going to first find out the file path of the file. So string file path, we are going to put the file path here, right? Now after we put the file path, we have to basically get the data from the file. So we are going to create an object of file input stream equal to new file input stream, and here we have to give this file path, right? So this is how we are going to give the file path to this file input stream, import the file input stream. Now what we have to do is we have got the data into file input stream. Now let's just try to initialize the properties variable as well. New properties, right? Prop equal to new properties. Now first thing is that we have to load the data from the file. So we have to load the input stream, and we are going to load here FIP because this is our file input stream. So it's going to ask you to maybe throw some exception if you try to get some data, because if in case it doesn't get the data. So we have a method within prop called get property. So here we are going to get the value of our property, right? Method we are going to use prop.get property. And what is the data in a config properties file? Let's say we want this home page link. So that particular thing we can mention here. So ignore this for the time being. Error is being thrown. Yeah. So I'm just showing you how do we get the property from a properties file. So it's asking us to handle file not found exception. We can either do it through try catch or through file not found exception being thrown. And here it is giving us IO exception. So let's throw file not found exception. And here, if I do throws IO exception, it's going to automatically take care of file not found exception, because file not found exception is a subtype of your IO exception. So let's throw the parent exception. So that will be taking care of file not found exception as well. So this is how we're going to get the data. Let's store it into our home page link, right? And that particular value we are going to, so directly we can use it like this. So this is how we are going to use the data from our properties file in our actual test script. So we need not hard code them directly. So that is the usage of your object repository. So for that we need to use a properties file. Okay, so I don't want to make it more lengthy session. So we'll just take one more question, 10th question, and then we can look at the next part in the next session. How will you find out total number of broken links in a page? You have to split it up into two parts now, this question. Find out total number of broken links. So they're talking about hyperlinks here. So a hyperlink is nothing but an anchor tag. So in this particular one, if you, let's try to inspect the Selenium easy one, right? Yeah, so this is the anchor tag. If you see there is a tag, it's a hyperlink. If I click on it, it is giving you these options. It's a hyperlink, it's a tag, anchor tag. And they are asking you to find out the total number of anchor tags. Now, how do you find out the total number of anchor tags? So if you know, this is the way we write the relative XPath. We start with double slash and we mention the tag name. It's an anchor tag or it could be any tag. So there are totally 128 anchor tags here, right? 128 anchor tags are there on this particular page. If I do next, it's going on suggesting me the next anchor tag, because I'm not giving any specific or direct XPath going to uniquely identify a specific element only. I'm just given a generic path here saying just anchor tag. So there are 128 tags on this page. So the only way I can achieve that, let me show in my sample one. This is having all the libraries available. So I'll go for this particular one. So the way to do that is, right, you just have to say driver.find elements by, right? So you're going to use finds elements by dot, you're going to use tag name, and you're going to say a tag. This is your tag. So this is how you're going to identify the total number of links on a page. Now this is going to return you the list of web elements. So you're going to store it in a list of web element and just say number of links, right? import this Java util list. Java util list is imported, right? And we are going to do iteration now. So we have to say number of links dot iterator. It's going to store it in a iterator variable. So store it in a iterator variable, right? And now we are going to do iterate. So maybe there is a duplicate. Yeah. So while itr1 dot has next. So till it is having some next element, it's going to do iteration, right? And every element which you're going to get next is going to be through this itr dot next. So that is going to give you one element, right? So we are going to store it in a web element, let's say, or a link. We can call it as a link. So every itr dot next is going to give you a web element. Yeah, so we have to use iterator of web element type. Yeah, let's see what is the exception here. Change type of link to string. Okay, why is it so? It's going to be a list of web element. We have used the iterator of web elements, right? So when we say itr dot next, let's just, okay, it's itr1 we want here, right? Because you're taking the type as itr1. So it's going to be a web element. Now, what we want to do with this element, we want to click on it. If we are able to click on it, it is a proper link. If we are unable to click on it, it's a broken link. So you're going to create a counter, right? So I'll be using click, or let's see, is enabled, is displayed, is selected. So is enabled means we are having that link enabled, right? So we can just go over it. It's a Boolean variable, so we can store it in a Boolean variable. So flag check, something like that. We can create a variable and we can just check if it is true, fine. So we can just say flag check here. Okay, so if flag check equal to false, right, then we want to increment a counter variable. Let's create a counter here. Start from 0 and you're just going to increment the counter plus plus. So that is how you're going to identify how many total number of links are not working. If you are trying to click on each link, you can even click on a link. So you can just do link.click. You can perform whatever operations you want inside this iteration, and you can also find out if it is broken or not. So these are some of the important questions which you can expect, the first set of important questions in Selenium. So we will be continuing with the next set of questions in our next session. So stay tuned and do subscribe to my channel if you have not done yet. Thank you so much.